Great. So we've just got half an hour today for the webinar, so we'll get going straight away. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Climate Transition Plans, New Expectations. This is the last one out of 3 in our webinar series, SBTi Net Zero Consultation, What Businesses Need to Know Now. So with SBTi reinforcing the role of climate transition plans in its latest draft, companies will need to go beyond the setting targets and demonstrating credible, actionable strategies to reach net zero. Today, in this 30-minute session, we will break down the key elements of the new draft guidance, explaining how SBTi applies it, and then related to transition plans in particular, what they are, what has changed under the new draft guidance, and how to align yours with the regional regulations. So a couple of housekeeping points before we dive in. You're all muted for the duration of this session, but please do post any questions in the Q&A box, and we'll answer some of these during a Q&A part at the end. And any we run out of time to answer, we will circulate answers via email. And this session will be recorded and sent to everyone who registered for the webinar as well. So joining me today for this webinar, we have Jorge Laranyanga, who is a principal consultant in our Japan office, and also Lauren Sheffers, one of our senior managing consultants based in Sydney, Australia. And I'm Emily Wayne, also a senior managing consultant based in Sydney as well. So yeah, great to be with you today. So let's dive into the agenda and run through what we're going to be focusing on for the next 30 minutes together. So as mentioned, our focus today is on climate transition plans. It's a crucial topic for companies navigating new sustainability expectations and regulations. We'll begin by highlighting key changes in the new draft of the Corporate Net Zero Standard version 2, including how it aligns with emerging global standards, particularly obviously focusing on the APAC region today. Then we'll be exploring how these evolving frameworks align with regulatory requirements, especially in regions like Australia. From there, we'll dive into the elements of building a credible climate transition plan. And finally, we'll cover some practical steps to help you get started and help you to refine your approach. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Lauren to get us started.
Great, thanks, Emily. So to start with, what is a climate transition plan? So simply put, a climate transition plan sets out how your business will transform to accelerate the transition to a 1.5-degree world. So externally, it allows your investors, insurers, civil society, and regulators to assess the integrity of your ambitions. And then internally, it defines how you plan to operationalize and finance your climate ambitions. So I guess think of your net zero ambition as your guiding star, defining your long-term aspiration that shapes decisions, investments, and behaviors across the organization. So much like a corporate purpose or mission, your net zero ambition really reflects your company's ultimate environmental responsibility. So both are directional rather than prescriptive, setting out a vision that inspires your stakeholders and signals intent to employees, investors, and customers. And then your climate transition plan is how you reach that ambition. So it's important to note that climate transition plans have shifted from optional and nice to have to a mandatory requirement. So the mandatory requirement is in place not just to increase transparency, accountability, and comparability of a company's sustainability efforts, but also it's looking to drive more sustainable business processes. So beyond compliance, regulations bring the potential to catalyze transformation, encouraging organizations to embed sustainability into their core business model, operations, and across value chains. So a well-constructed climate transition plan is not just a tick box exercise for compliance. It unlocks long-term value, positioning businesses to thrive in a rapidly evolving and low-carbon economy. And this in turn creates a more attractive investment case for businesses, aligning with investor expectations of disclosure and future-proofing. Next slide, please. So now we'll dive into the version 2 of the Corporate Net Zero Standard. So as many of you know, the SBTi is revising its corporate net zero standard, and as part of this process, it has published a first draft of version 2 of the standard for public consultation. So timeline-wise, the final version is planned to be published in 2026 and come into effect in 2027. While there's a transition period for companies either setting new targets or updating existing targets, the two main points are that existing near-term targets remain valid until 2030 or their end date, whichever comes first. And from 2030 onwards, companies must set new targets using version 2 of the standard. And so looking at how the latest net zero standard or version 2 has evolved, the SBTi have placed a much greater emphasis on action and implementation. So in version 1 of the standard, SBTi encouraged companies to have a climate transition plan, but the expectations were relatively light. There were no detailed requirements on structure, timing, or disclosure. And with version 2 that's currently out in draft, that changes quite significantly. So the SBTi proposes a detailed set of mandatory requirements for transition plans, aligning closely with global frameworks like the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero and the International Sustainability Standards Board, or ISSB. So let's unpack the most notable shifts and new expectations in place. So the first one, universality. Importantly, this is now mandatory for all companies, regardless of their size or sector, closing a key gap in the previous standard. Timing. So the plan must be published within 12 months of having targets validated to ensure early transparency and accountability. Structure and scope. So companies must now include specific elements like governance, strategy, financing, metrics, and stakeholder engagement, making the plan not just a narrative, but really a fully fledged operational strategy. Accountability. So companies must track and report annually against implementation indicators such as progress on emissions reduction initiatives or CapEx alignment. And finally, enabling levers. So this is a new and important addition. SBTi now requires companies to disclose the levers they'll use to enable their targets. That includes internal decisions such as R&D investments and also external strategies like policy, advocacy, and supplier engagement. So this evolution positions climate transition plans as the core of corporate decarbonisation. And again, it's important to repeat here that building a climate transition plan is not just a tick box exercise. It's really a tool for real operational change. And now we'll look at how these transition plans align with emerging regulatory expectations, specifically in Australia. So the Australian Sustainability Reporting Standards, or ASRS, which closely mirror the ISSB standards, are introducing mandatory climate-related disclosures for large entities in Australia starting from 2025. So these disclosures require that your climate transition plan include targets and timelines for decarbonisation, strategies across operations, investments, and asset portfolios, assumptions and dependencies, whether that's on future policy shifts, technologies, or carbon prices, clear governance and risk oversight at board level, financial impacts on CapEx, operational costs and asset valuations, and metrics to track progress, such as emissions and climate KPIs. So a few key considerations here: plans must be tailored to the entity, no copy pasting generic content. They must be verifiable and consistent, ensuring that investors can trust and use the information. And you really need robust systems internally to support ongoing tracking and reporting. Turning to Japan now, so by adhering to the robust requirements of ISSB for your climate transition plan, you will largely satisfy the Sustainability Standards Board of Japan, or SBTi standards, with a few additional nuances concerning governance and the detailed reporting of GHG emissions. So additional requirements to align a climate transition plan with SBTi include the disclosure of a named individual board director who is personally responsible for the overall design and delivery of the company's transition plan. The SBTi also requires entities to disclose the unit of presentation. So for example, metric tons of CO2 equivalent for reported amounts in sustainability related financial disclosures. And also under this standard, it's recommended to use the GHG Protocol 2004 for measuring GHG emissions. Now looking to investor expectations. So South Pole recently released our 2025 net zero report. And this year we focused on financial institutions because financial institutions really have the power to lead the market and instigate global climate action. So looking at some of the data we collected in this report, we can see that in APAC, 69% of financial institutions say that a CTP makes a company more attractive to finance, clearly outlining that financial institutions value CTPs so much so that it actually enhances investment attractiveness for those companies which have one. So one key takeaway from this data is that companies looking for investment should proactively develop and disclose a climate transition plan to align with investor expectations and improve financing opportunities. So if you are curious about other findings included in this global survey, you can head to our website and download the full report. And I will hand over to you, Jorge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's look then at how to build a climate transition plan that is embedded across your organization. So the most important is that it's not just a sustainability team effort. So it must actually integrate finance, operations, and governance, as you can see on the slide. So when we look at finance, it's about funding the transition. So you need to first assess climate risk and opportunities thoroughly, align your financial planning to those insights, use tools like climate integrated budgeting and internal carbon pricing, and explore funding mechanisms such as green bonds or sustainability linked loans. So in terms of operations, here the focus is on delivering low carbon outcomes. So it's important to set science-based targets across scope 1, 2, 3, improve operational efficiency and shift to renewable energy, engage your supply chain to support scope 3 reductions, and also innovate to bring low carbon products and services to market. And lastly, in terms of governance, to ensure success in your carbon transition plan, you need leadership and accountability. For example, boards must actively oversee climate risks and strategy. Management should be clearly accountable for climate goals. And you should utilize cross-functional teams to drive coordinated action. And lastly, climate must become part of your strategic decision-making process. So you can see here on the slide that we recommend 6 steps to success, but you don't need to complete what all each step entails. So it's better if you actually can consider this opportunity to decide what is your ambition. So it's totally fine if your climate transition plan is just a journey or a roadmap. It's also okay if you focus on complying with mandatory compliant disclosures in the first year, with the idea of building out something more standalone on year 2. And there is also great value if you just develop like a roadmap or blueprint of your climate transition plan on the first year, and that will help you actually to put together a complete climate transition plan in year 2. So let's take now a look to a case study, one that we did actually with APAC Energy, one of the Australia's leading energy infrastructure companies. So our climate experts actually outlined 3 essential components for building an effective climate transition plan. So first, as you can see on the right side, we explained the importance of having a clear understanding of what best practice looks like. This means being aware of the current standards in industry, understanding stakeholder expectations, and knowing what leading companies are doing in terms of climate action. Second, we walk them through how to develop a practical action plan to align with those best practices. So we emphasize the need for clear milestones, defined responsibilities, and measurable targets to make the plan operational, not just aspirational. And finally, we highlighted the need to connect a transition plan to overall business strategy and climate-related disclosures. So this ensures that the plan is not treated as a standalone initiative, but as something that is integrated into core decision-making and future growth strategy. So by breaking it down this way, so we provided Epic Energy with a structured approach on what best practice looks like for a credible and strategic climate transition plan. Okay, so to wrap up, here are our top recommendations to guide your climate transition planning. So first is about starting with building a strong foundation. That means understanding what a climate transition plan is and how it differs from your own ESG report, sustainability report, or roadmap. It's also important to conduct a gap analysis across your footprint, targets, and decarbonization levels. Assess climate-related risks and opportunities, and also establish clear governance for overseeing and delivering the plan. So second is about engaging your stakeholders. So early engagement helps build internal support and ownership. It ensures that your plan reflects what matters most to your investors, regulators, and customers. It can also surface opportunities for partnerships and innovation. And finally, transparency builds trust and credibility, which is essential for your climate claims to be taken seriously.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren and Jorge, for talking us through that. We'll move now to some questions. So we've got some in from the audience. I think the first one, let me just have a quick look. The first one is probably a good one for you, Lauren. So someone's asking that they've already published their sustainability report. So how is a climate transition plan sort of that different from maybe their existing sustainability report?
Yes, thanks, Emily, and great question. So I guess a sustainability report typically provides a broad overview of your environmental, social, and governance or ESG performance. So it's really often more of a kind of backward-looking report, so focusing on past actions and current practices. In contrast, I guess a climate transition plan is more forward-looking and strategic. So specifically outlining how your business will transition to a low carbon or net zero future. So a climate transition plan typically includes clear targets and timelines for emissions reductions, so scopes 1, 2, and 3, a strategy for transforming your operations, investments, and business model, financial implications such as expected CapEx, OpEx, and valuations, governance structures to oversee the implementation of your climate transition plan, assumptions, risks, and reliance on technology or policy developments. So really think of the CTP as your bridge, getting you from that ambition. So perhaps it's your net zero target to execution. So really it's a detailed investor grade plan that shows how the business will adapt and remain resilient in a carbon constrained world.
Great, amazing. Thanks, Lauren, for that answer. Another question that we've had come through is, what role does the finance team play in climate transition planning? I'll pass this one over to you, Jorge.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I mean that's a good question. Like finance, we know that plays a very important role. I mean, we need it actually to identify what is the cost of transition, how to align our budgets with climate goals, and also how to unlock capital to fund those climate initiatives that we have within our company. So just more precisely about the finance team role in that climate transition planning. So we think that they will need to see how to incorporate those climate risk and opportunities into financial models. So they can use tools, as we mentioned, like internal carbon pricing, really good tool actually to get like all the different departments aligned into what needs to be done. And also they should actually explore other financial options. So like green bonds or sustainability linked loans. I think that could be also an option. And we also expect actually the finance team to work closely with the sustainability teams. I mean, this is just a joint effort that they need to be aware of. I mean, the reason to do that is they need to ensure that investment decisions will support long-term decarbonization targets. So for that, they need to be aligned with the sustainability team. So I hope this answers the question. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Jorge. And a third question's come through from the audience. So maybe one again for you, Lauren. What makes a climate transition plan credible in the eyes of particularly regulators and investors?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emily. So I guess a credible climate transition plan, it's going to need to be specific, actionable, and aligned with a recognized framework. So that might be the ISSB or the Transition Plan Task Force. So it includes your clear emissions reduction targets, ideally science-based, outlines operational and financial strategies, and is governed with strong board oversight. And I think importantly, based on verifiable data and assumptions, it's going to provide transparency on the financial impact and how the company plans to execute and monitor the transition. So really generic or boilerplate plans are seen as red flags by both regulators and investors. So yeah, definitely specific, actionable, and aligned with a recognized framework.
Great, thank you so much, Lauren. I can see now we're responding to questions. We've got quite a few more coming through from the audience. So just fielding some of these now. Let me just take a look. Let me see. So we have one question, and again, we'll respond to these as best we can on the webinar right now, and we'll be sharing a full response to all questions via email afterwards. So this first question, or this next one, can you share with us South Pole's understanding of how SBTi's version 2 will treat carbon offsets when validating targets, i.e. has the SBTi flipped back to residual emissions only, less than 10%, or will version 2 allow for a higher level of offsets as per the directive from mid-2024? So our understanding of this at the moment is removals and beyond value chain mitigation, so carbon credits, is included in more detail within this version 2 draft. I suppose, it is a business challenge that there is uncertainty on addressing residual emissions. However, in the new draft, the SBTi has included suggestion of, I suppose, essentially sort of rewarding companies for a certain level of beyond value chain mitigation, so carbon credit purchase. And it laid out options as to sort of which parts of the GHG footprint it might address as part of that in the guidance. So I think short answer, yes, it's much more incorporated into the new version 2 draft, but it will become clearer when the final version is published in 2027 as to which sort of option the SBTi will move forwards with in relation to beyond value chain mitigation. Just having a look at some other questions that are coming through. I think this one is likely a good one for Lauren. So the question is, this may be a best practice to publish a standalone climate transition plan. How do you think about incorporating the CTP into the sustainability report to keep it updated every year?
Yeah, sure. So I guess if we look to some of those global frameworks that I was mentioning before, so for example, the Transition Plan Task Force, there's no kind of set requirement to publish a standalone climate transition plan. The guidance is really kind of, encouraging companies to find what will work best for you. So if that is integrating into a yearly or annual sustainability report, then that works as well. I guess also I would consider, what your stakeholders are asking for. So, if your investors or other stakeholders are particularly interested to see it in one document, then you can always take that route. But it's really whatever works for the business. And I guess considering resource intensiveness as well. So, you know, if it is more streamlined and efficient to include in your annual sustainability report, that can be okay.
Great, thanks Lauren for the response. And I think that's a great point on resource intensiveness as well. There are a lot of sustainability teams out there where it is quite restrained in terms of manpower within your team. So streamlining is always a positive there. One more question I think we've got time for before we wrap up today. Jorge, I'll pass this one over to you. So the question is, at the infrastructure project level, must a project account for Scope 3 emissions in order to claim net zero status?
Yeah, I mean, short answer is yes. I mean, we know that for like certain general corporate reporting, actually, Scope 3 emissions may be voluntary. But here, when we are talking about net zero, and in particular, if we consider the SBTi net zero standard, it says actually that companies are required to set a Scope 3 targets if those emissions represent over 40% of the total Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So usually that's the case actually for infrastructure projects and companies. So yeah, answer would be yes.
Great, amazing. Thanks, Jorge, for the response. So I think that's probably all the questions that we've got time for today. We have seen a few more come through from the audience, so we will respond to those via email in more detail, and included within that will also summarize the responses to the questions that we have covered during the webinar today. So just a couple of wrap-up points for you today. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us. It was great to have you all with us. We hope that this session really provided some valuable insights into this draft guidance and also climate transition plans themselves. Before we sign off, we're thrilled to announce that we will be having a bonus episode in addition to these 3 webinars. On June 17th and 18th, so coming up next month, we'll be hosting a final session for the series on SBTi's with our CEO. This 45-minute session will include a presentation on SBTi's with our CEO, with the CEO David Kennedy, and a Q&A conversation with South Pole CEO Dr. Daniel Clear as well. The session will end with live and pre-submitted audience questions, so do make sure you submit your burning questions to be answered by those 2 great CEOs ahead of the session. The best one to join in terms of the APAC time zone will be on June 17th at 4 p.m. Singaporean time and 6 p.m. Australia Eastern time, as both CEOs are based in the UK. So we'll get them as their day begins. And yeah, we hope you can join us for that continuing the conversation and Q&A. You will all receive this webinar from us today in terms of the recording and also a link to register for this bonus session into your inbox as well. So just a couple more wrap-up points. Very quickly, just a reminder of South Pole and our purpose is really true climate impact for all. And we do have a world of experience across the globe. So yeah, we look forward to having many ongoing conversations with many of you in the future. So yeah, thank you all for joining today and wish you a lovely rest of your day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.